Skype chief currency analyst of ForexLive, Adam Button. Good to see you, Adam.
Hi, Greg.
So explain that to me. I think most Canadians are looking at the value of our currency and saying, my God, the pullback that it has had. You say it's actually stable considering the conditions.
Yeah, I mean, that's just really an indication of the times we're in. The Canadian dollar's down about 9.5% over the last couple months. Whereas if you look at something that usually tracks the Canadian dollar, like the Australian dollar or even the Norwegian krona, they're down 12% or 20% respectively. And it's not just that, it's the intraday volatility. So if we look at either one of those, really, you'll see even just yesterday or overnight, the Australian dollar fell 5% and then came all the way back, and now it's up 1 or 2%. So we haven't had that kind of disorderly move in the Canadian dollar. We saw something similar in the pound yesterday where it fell 5% in 15 minutes. So, to me, when I step back and look at that, I mean, obviously, we don't want to be in the Canadian dollar. It's not a great place to be right now. It's had a horrible week, something we were talking about that it could have, last time we talked a week ago. And now it's at the point where maybe it gets to that kind of breakdown again if it doesn't hold at some of these levels we're at right now.
That seems to be that we're in the situation that investors, as they look for havens, are not finding many of them. They seem to have chosen the U.S. greenback, at least for now.
And that's one of those kinds of things that snowball. I think as the kind of cascading losses came down on everyone, everyone was looking for different places to hide. Bonds worked really well for a while, and then this week, they didn't work at all, and a lot of those gains were unwound. And gold worked for a little bit at the start of this crisis, and then that sort of fell apart. And the only thing that was working was the U.S. dollar, and then that kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy as more and more people pile into it, and then liquidity gets short, and it's just a kind of an unstoppable force, and it's at scary proportions here now. The Federal Reserve and some other central banks stepped in today to try to ease some of the funding strains, and only time will tell if that's successful.
In terms of central bank action, it is hard to keep up. I mean, the big move from the Bank of Canada last Friday, Sunday, we heard from Jay Powell. Today we got the ECB coming out strong, the Bank of England. What is the effect on the currency trade right now? It seems that we get a massive package, a massive headline every couple hours.
Yeah, even the Bank of England came out today, cut another 10 basis points or 15 basis points and launched QE. There is, I think the unifying message right now is that the Federal Reserve especially won't let anyone go down. And you could say the same thing about the Bank of England and the ECB. And the Bank of Canada doesn't seem to have that same sort of pressure, which is a good sign for the Canadian banks and a good sign for the Canadian dollar, because they haven't been forced into as many panic moves. Again, it's all relative at this point. In terms of the differentials, well, they don't really mean anything anymore. We're in the phase of the crisis where it's about solvency and keeping the lights on. So there's been a strong commitment to that from central bankers and from governments, but maybe you can only hold back the dam for so long. I think we're going to make a stand here on the Canadian dollar on a few fronts. And, if this holds, we're either going to have a short-term bottom or a long-term bottom. But I think it's gone just a little bit too far, too fast on a lot of fronts right now.
Of course, one of the pressures for the Canadian dollar would be the fact that, rightfully so, our biggest trading partners. So when we say, what is a Canadian dollar worth? Well, we compare it to the U.S. dollar. That's what a Canadian dollar is worth. If that safe haven trade keeps playing into the greenback, even apart from our fundamentals, it can't mean great things for us.
Well, that's really the risk. I mean, Canada is a price taker of global exports, right? And as those prices collapse, we're in bad shape to begin with. And then as the U.S. dollar shoots higher, you can certainly imagine a scenario where it goes much farther. You have Canada, where Canadians, I think, are relatively happy to hold Canadian dollars even through this. But you have emerging market currencies that are plunging much further, where people have much less confidence in the government to handle any kind of crisis. And there is far more political instability. And so you see that pressure right now from places like Mexico. And as this virus spreads around the world into much poorer countries, that demand for U.S. dollar and that U.S. dollar safety is going to remain. So, all else equal, as the panic spreads, I think the dollar has that bid remain. So that's the best place to be until we start to see some better headlines or some sort of medical breakthrough. I think a headline like that where we see some treatment, Donald Trump tried to play it up today, that can turn things, because there are amazing deals. You see it in Canada and Canadian assets, but everybody's still scared to step in.
Only got about a minute left before I let you go, Adam. I just wanted to ask you about, over the years, one of the threads through our many conversations has been about central banks having the firepower to react to a crisis. Well, now we're in a crisis. Can they keep on going? They fired some pretty big guns so far.
The financial crisis it's the speed of it, right? They have the firepower, and I think politicians are willing to give them more firepower. But it's just fallen apart so quickly right now that can they deploy the tools quick enough? And, right now they've been in this race against time, and every day when they unload something new, well, that kind of gives you the sense that something happened that they didn't anticipate. So I think ultimately they have shown that they're willing to backstop everything, and that's a great sign. But will it be enough? I believe it will be. But, you don't want to dip any more than one or two toes into the water at this point.
Adam, it's always great to get your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Greg.
Adam Button's the Chief Currency Analyst at ForexLive.